great unknown, the winding forest paths and fresh streams and the sounds of nature, to feel the inhale and exhale of the world around you, to breathe it all in and be confronted only with the essential. This is a path meant for few but open to all. It's not far away, but we have to go out and seek it. Be open to its call, its beckon, its unconditional invitation to explore. I've been inspired by the story of Christopher McCandless in Into the Wild nearly all of my adult life. It wasn't where or how he ended up at his final destination that inspired me, but what he and his journey stood for. 6 months ago, I quit my job, and the next day I embarked on my own adventure into the wild. It wasn't the woods that scared me. I had grown up a Boy Scout and camped dozens of times before. It was being alone and separated from the world as I knew it. I was afraid of facing myself and seeing what I would find. I almost didn't go. Thankfully, one of my best friends pushed me, and I took a leap of faith. The first day I intended to spend in front of the fire, writing and smoking cigars, relaxation, reflection, and full of cliche. However, nature and my ego had other plans, as the day had come and gone and still, no fire. I quickly dug out the fire pit from the snow, piled on logs into a log cabin structure, and tried to light the whole thing at once. I knew that one good scratch off my flint and steel would spark an ember and light the whole thing on fire. But it didn't. So I went to matches, and then, in an act of desperation, I just doused the whole thing in kerosene and tried to light it. No luck. I had skipped the most time-consuming and crucial part, collecting the small twigs, tinder and kindling to act as fuel. You can't have a big fire without first having a smaller one. I had rushed to the finish. Why am I rushing this? Rushing tasks ends up taking up more time than going slow, I wrote in my journal that day. The last few years of my life have been a rush to the finish. And now here I was at 25. How we do one thing is how we do all things. On my second day, I asked for help. I called my dad for wisdom, and I called the Airbnb host for more matches. And in the moment he passed me that piece of wood with a big lighter lodged inside, he passed me more than that. He passed me the torch bridging the gap between the boy I was and the man I am. I let the embers in my ego cool and started with the foundation. The ground was wet, so I used pine and small twigs to build it anew. I collected and sawed up branches, kept a pile close by. I shaved kindling with my knife and slid it onto the pile of pine. I built a lean-to for a structure, but most importantly, I decided I would light the fire even if it meant it wouldn't stay lit. But this time it did, because I had started small and continued to feed it. And because I decided that I would watch it until it burned no more, for I was this fire's keeper. On the next day, I lit the fire with one match and watched it until it burned no more. I spent a lot of time in front of that fire, writing furiously in my notebook about all my hopes, dreams, thoughts, and reflections. But mostly I wrote about what I felt was holding me back, the thoughts that stuck out of my mind like icebergs, hidden deep in my subconscious and weighing me down, pulling me under. I tore out page after page of these iceberg thoughts and threw it into the fire. I thanked them for their lessons and let them go. On my third day at the cabin at the pond, I did a solo mushroom ceremony. Now, I'm not recommending this or condoning it, but trying simply to relay my experience. And it was scary as shit. I'd like to dive into detail in another video when I feel ready to share that story. But one of the biggest lessons I learned is that it's not about how much of an experience, how much of something you consume, but how deep you choose to explore. Everything mirrors the depth at which we're willing to go. The surface of some is the deep shadows for another. I spent hours inside traversing the wilderness of my mind. It was scary and there were tears flowing down my cheeks like rivers, not unlike the environment I was surrounded by. But there was also deep reverence and peace, a deep understanding poured into the vessel of my body and spirit. I took pride in the dirt underneath my fingernails and the texture of the untamed beard on my chin. I felt free, wild, and uncivilized for the first time in a long time. I wrote in my journal that day, I came to the mountains seeking clarity, and then I find freedom to live, act, to be. I am not bound by the chains of men. I have found freedom. Plain and simple. Life on my terms. That night I walked through the woods with my flashlight. I crossed a bridge over a waterfall and celebrated a new phase of my life I was stepping over into. When I returned, I heard the sound of drums beating from across the distant shore. I didn't know from whom or where exactly it was coming from, but I don't believe in mere coincidences. I stepped into the light of the full moon and let it pour over me. And then I watched the fire and carved Wild Man into a smooth branch nearby. My last day was a bitter, sweet one. I prepared all my things, loaded my car, and prepared for the trek back to civilization. Truth be told, I didn't want to go back. I had become intoxicated by the beauty and simplicity of life in the wild. I had food, water, and time with myself. There was one thing missing though. As Christopher McCandless wrote shortly before he died, happiness is only real when shared. And that's how I find myself communicating and expressing this to you now. I believe that it's my duty to pull out the nectar and wisdom of my experiences and share them with you, the world. I encourage you to embrace your wild side, the freedom inherent in your soul. I encourage you to accept the call to adventure no matter how hard it seems to be. What whispers to you, the voice that urges you forward, listen to it. Do it safely, do it courageously, and don't half-ass it. I'll see you in the next video.